Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the 8-Bit Adventures Podcast. This is episode 269. Another fairly light news week. I really had to dig deep for some of the news this week. And I've talked about this on a previous episode. I believe it was episode 267, in fact. But I want to talk a little bit more about an indie RPG called Rod, Reel, and Fist. So I have the soft cover print copy of it that my wife got me for my birthday. So I'm very excited for that. So we're going to talk about that for our deep dive. But yeah, what's it? Very, very light. Another light episode this week. Almost as if not having E3 really kind of messed with the gaming news cycle and the general collapse of things happening around us in the United States. Almost kind of drowning out any kind of inconsequential in the grand scheme of things gaming news going on. So there's that. But rest assured, I was able to find some stuff. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about this lovely little indie tabletop RPG where you'll get to listen to me talk about fish. So how's everyone doing? You doing okay? You taking your meds? Drinking lots of water? Taking a nap when you need it? I hope you are. Because rest assured, we all need self-care. Yeah, without further ado, let's get into our news this week, shall we? All right, so first up, God of War Ragnarok. We got a release date confirmed for November 9th. So this is the next iteration. Like, I don't want to call it a sequel because it's like a sequel to like the fourth version. Yeah, numbering gets weird with PlayStation. It's like PlayStation, Xbox. Like, why bother with numbers at this point? I don't know. But yeah, so God of War Ragnarok. It at least is a direct sequel to the events of the previous God of War game, which again is in itself part of a series of the God of War games, which happen in a linear format. But this one at least continues with the sort of Norse theme. So yeah, November 9th for now anyway. Like that is what the tentative release date is. I mean, that's still 4 months away. So a lot could happen. Who knows? So yeah, PlayStation fans excited about that this week. Next up, speaking of Norse mythology, Thor: Love and Thunder, that releases this week, folks. So if you are watching this live, it releases tomorrow because of that whole, like, it releases on Friday, but technically Thursday night sort of thing. And if you're listening to this on the audio version on the day it came out, then it comes out today. Yay! Goal is to try and go see it this weekend. Maybe. Depending on if we can find a sitter or not. And if we can, I will talk about it next week. I absolutely want to go see this in theaters. Because it looks great. Just between Taika Waititi directing and just how much fun Chris Hemsworth is having as Thor, and Korg comes back, Natalie Portman comes back, and she looks great as Thor. I'm super stoked for it. And Gore the God Butcher, played by Christian Bale. So there we go. Super excited. This is kind of the most anticipated movie of the year for me. So we'll see if it lives up to my expectations, and if Taika Waititi can do it again, can repeat the success of Thor Ragnarok. So here's hoping, folks. Also, the Star Wars fandom completely in a tizzy over supposedly some comment Taika made to Natalie Portman asking if she wanted to be in a Star Wars film. Because he's set to direct one of the next Star Wars movies, and her saying, well, I've been in 3 before, and I just, Star Wars fandom is impossible to please, and it's terrible and it's awful. So instead of taking it as like a haha, that's funny, instead being like, this is the worst thing ever, and how dare he be put in charge of a Star Wars film. For the audio listeners, I made a face. That I'm done. I'm done with that fandom. Like, I can't. There's no pleasing them, and they just get up in arms about every possible little thing, and it is just tiresome. So next up, transitioning to Xbox. So games with gold, Xbox games with gold. So the messaging is a little confusing. So all the headlines for this say Xbox 360 games will no longer be offered as part of the service as of October. But the actual message from Microsoft is that they will not be adding any more titles. However, users will retain any previously downloaded titles. So I would say if you want to get any Xbox 360 games, get them now. Don't wait. Just in case, like, they all go away, as opposed to they're just not adding anymore. Because I was very confused between the messaging of the media outlets versus the messaging from Microsoft on that one. But basically, as of October, and they're citing basically like ongoing copyright and licensing issues with getting a lot of games, like 360 games. So yeah, whether or not it means that like they're pulling them all or they're just not offering any more outside of the ones they have, you might want to play it safe, especially since you, like, if you've downloaded the title, you will have it until something causes you to not have it. So there you go. A little PSA for that one. Also, another PSA, the Wii Shop channel is back online for re-downloads after a few months of downtime. I know we've talked about this a couple times in the podcast on how it mysteriously went down for maintenance and then nobody ever heard from it again. But it is confirmed to be back online. So once again, it just allows you to re-download previous purchases. But that was a big sticking point for a lot of people. So, and as far as I know, there hasn't been any official word from Nintendo as to why the downtime took so long, or what. But yeah, some good news. So you can get back in there and listen to your Wii Shop music. So yeah. And that wraps up our rapid fire news this week, folks. Again, not a lot of really impactful news. I mean, there's some weird news back and forth here and there, but like, I didn't really consider it worth reporting on. Like Twitter feuds and I don't know, weird one-off things. That like didn't really fit like the big grand scheme of things. And honestly, outside of the Wii Shop Channel stuff, like nothing on Nintendo's front really. You know, an example of one of the was like Nintendo pulled the like a bunch of the Switch videos from YouTube, and everybody took that as oh this means that Switch Pro's confirmed. And then they announced like today that there's going to be a special Splatoon Switch OLED. But like, you know, like it's still just a Switch OLED. It's just like a new model with different colors and things like that. So again, it feels like everybody that certain outlets will say that try and jump the gun and sort of stir the pot and be like, oh, this clearly means that there's a Switch Pro coming. Really kind of look like they got egg on their face right now, but they're also shameless outlets, so they won't care. But so yeah, little really rapid fire news. So with that wrapped up, let's do our deep dive and talk about some fishing. All right, so for the benefit of people watching live or the VOD, once again, Rod, Reel, and Fist. A fishing adventure game. So this is Ian Hamilton presents Rod, Reel, and Fist, a game by Richard Kelly. This is an indie RPG. It uses its own system, and it is designed to sort of recreate the feel of sort of lighter I guess it's very specifically like Legend of the River King. The default setting is 1980s Japan, and the idea is so there is a game master that is known as the Swamp Being. They sort of run the game, and then you have your players who are all anglers. And you sort of collaboratively decide like what the scenario is, what the setting is, and any special things, what your characters like, dislike, how do they all know each other, where are they from, with ultimately the goal being that you have to catch a legendary fish in order to solve the problem. And the way like the setting goes, and a way that a lot of these stories and sort of the genre typically goes, is like you are looking for the blessing of a legendary fish or an item from the legendary fish or a scale or something in order to resolve some sort of calamity. And that can be like major calamity or personal calamity, like all, it can run the gamut. And so the game seeks to recreate recreate that experience. So the way it works is it sort of is a conflict driven game. In that fishing kind of inherently is conflict. And so a large portion of the rules are devoted to sort of resolving that. And so ultimately the way it works is like it's the only mechanics in the game kind of revolve around fishing or fighting off animals. Everything else is kind of just handled freeform. Which depending on who you ask, is a good thing or a bad thing. But I kind of like how they present the rules. It's a little bit of an interesting sort of rolling more dice. So you use 6-sided dice for this one. So a little bit more accessible than a lot of other RPGs out there. And ultimately, like, you don't deal with stats, you don't deal with like classes or levels or hit points or anything like that. How the gameplay works essentially is um, when your group decides to go out fishing for a particular day, uh, you pick a spot, you go fish. I'm sorry, no, there. It essentially uses just like regular dice rolling, um, to resolve other tasks. It's just that they don't have any other systems built into it for that. So essentially, it sort of becomes just like a general die roll to resolve things. For those who play D20 games, very similar to just like an ability check. But there's not like a whole other system built in to handle that. You might have like an ability that gives you extra dice, or lets you do certain activities a little easier. Namely, like social's kind of just all wrapped under one group of things, and like exploring is also just wrapped under a whole group. Like movement related stuff is wrapped up all together. But so you decide, like, you go out, you pick a spot to go fishing, and like you go fishing, and essentially how it works is you hook a fish, and the swamp being tells you, like, unless you have a special ability, like, this is just how powerful the fish is, but doesn't tell you what kind of fish it is. And then what you do is you do sort of a step-by-step back and forth with the fish of rolling dice, trying to hit target numbers. And it's sort of like so the first set of rolls that you do is like a stand firm test. And that's to see, like, if you're still in the game. And then if you fail that, then you have to make a hold on. And if you, the angler, fails your hold on roll, basically the fish gets away. And if the fish fails their hold on roll, they're caught. So the idea is you are working through that to try and get one of those outcomes. Now there are things like there's sort of a technique triangle. So always down for technique triangles, in that you can use power, finesse, or I think it's cunning, or something like that. Where power beats finesse, finesse beats cunning, cunning beats power. And if you essentially win that triangle, you get extra dice. I think it's you get extra dice. It's either that or if you lose the triangle, you lose dice. Okay, so sorry. So the loser loses 2 dice from their dice pool to a minimum of 1. You can then also like strain, which is you can sacrifice any number of your dice from your dice pool to remove them from your opponent's dice pool. There's a mechanic for providing help. There's a mechanic for tagging out, which, like, that is wild to me. Like, you are in the middle of like reeling in this fish, and you're just like, I'm too tired. I'm tired now. I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna lose it, guys. Like, come on, tag out, tag me in, and like you tag somebody else in, and they like grab the fishing pole from you, and they start reeling in. So yeah, it's and the way failure matters is that they use exhaustion and stress. And what that does is essentially, for every point of exhaustion or stress, it increases your difficulty number, like your 2 hit numbers by 1. Stress is for a particular encounter only, and exhaustion like persists throughout the day. And ultimately, you just keep going until like you kind of build up enough exhaustion that you can't really do anything else that day. It's represented as you're either too tired, too stressed out, too frustrated, and you go back to camp and you just hang out uh, and chit chat and do whatever. Or sometimes you might be able to still like yell encouragement and like help your other people. Um, so yeah, and then occasionally like other animals might show up and you got to fight them off. And so it kind of uses the same system with a few tweaks that make it interesting enough to be different. And I mean that's pretty much the game. Like you get certain abilities that relate to giving you bonuses for different things. And then there's like different equipment that you can get. But ultimately, it's intended to be just a much lighter experience than a lot of sort of very crunchy games go. And the goal is to ultimately like sort of work your way up to catching a legendary fish. And once you catch a legendary fish, like that's it. You've saved the village and everything. It does say there are variants where you can put a time limit so that essentially you have X number of days to catch the legendary fish, and if you don't do it within that time, like whatever calamity occurs, and essentially you were unsuccessful in preventing it. So it has a whole section for like building your own setting. It has 6 different settings that you can do that range from again the default setting of 1980s Japan to like fishing in space. To essentially a spoof on Fist of the North Star, of sort of a little like I don't know how to describe it, like somewhat post-apocalyptic, almost Mad Max kind of style game. Um, there's one where it's the year 20XX and fishing is illegal. Set in New West Boston Harbor. um, there's one called Jovian Sleigh Ride, where it's in space. That's the one that's in space. And it's based on another setting in game by Josh Berkowitz Geller and Adam Kraus. So working with other designers. Skyhook, which is like some kind of, I don't know, weird post-apocalyptic alien invasion type thing. Nomadic ether punk world of floating nations, flying fauna, and unguessable artifacts left behind by Earth's destruction. 40,000 Leagues Under the Sea, so deep sea, which is not at all terrifying whatsoever. There is sort of a tower defense mini game. There's a roguelike legacy mod. And then there's, it's like a little one-pager on how to incorporate this into your existing game. Which ultimately I was a little disappointed in that basically they say like you just have the existing characters just use these rules, and you do it for a session. If you're gonna do like a beach episode or something, and it's like, well, I mean, that's not really like how to incorporate it into your game, because like it doesn't really have rules on like how to integrate it. Yeah, so when using Rod Reel to run a beach episode, it's recommended that you create beach versions of the main characters by restatting them as fishers rather than trying to Frankenstein the two sets of mechanics together. So yeah, like ultimately, so I do take a little bit of issue where it's like, we have rules for making your game like making this compatible with your game, and it's like, well, no, you don't though. You like, I mean, that's like saying, if I'm running a D&D campaign, and I want to have a one-off episode where instead of doing heroic combat, they do sort of like a gumshoe sleuth sort of episode that we use powered by the apocalypse, and I'm sure there's some sort of gumshoe or some gumshoe game, right? And essentially just recreating the characters under that system and then just running it there. Like, that's not really integrating it into the game. But I mean, the rules are light enough that, I mean, you could in theory splice it into something else. But that's the only issue that I have. I will say the artwork, in my opinion, is very hit or miss. Just for my own personal taste, it's and I find this a lot with like indie TTRPG books, is oftentimes there's a wide variety of art, and the quality of the artwork within can vary quite a bit. So I don't know if this game had an art director. I mean, it had a whole team. A fairly large team. So um yeah. Uh so yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's just who they got, but yeah, I kind of wish there was a bit more consistency in the quality of the art. So yeah, it does say it influences Legend of the River King, Golden Sky Stories, Ryutama, Department H, Nusakana, and Mech Fission. I am only familiar with one of these things. But ultimately, I like this not just as its own game, but as a way to think about how to incorporate this, essentially as a mini game for other systems and settings. Thinking about like if there are other RPGs like this out there for other genres, of games that you typically don't see in the RPG space, that I think would be interesting to see, like if somebody's done like a farming RPG. Is there just a way to kit bash stuff together to create something like Harvest Moon or Stardew Valley, or Rune Factory? And I think something like Rune Factory or Square's upcoming Harvestella would be a really interesting case study of adapting that for print, and because basically like it has sort of the JRPG system in there, and like you go into dungeons and fight, and like this is even true of like Stardew Valley, is they have the mine, so like you go in and you fight monsters, and that's like part of the game. So you could tack a few systems onto D&D, and that ends up working for that. You would just have to you'd have to kind of branch out a bit in how things are done. But I think that would be fun and interesting. And this lovely little RPG, I think does a nice job at providing enough mechanics so that it feels like you're doing something impactful, and like that there's enough meat to the rules for the focus of the game, and then letting other elements sort of fall into the background a bit, because it's like ultimately, if it's an RPG about fishing, you probably want most of your mechanics to be about fishing. And I know this kind of circles back into the discussion of, and I know I've had this before, of like Dungeons and Dragons, of how the focus is probably on combat, since that's where most of the mechanics point to, and how I think if D&D really wants to move away from this like big focus on wargaming to being a fully all-encompassing RPG, that it needs more rules and modules concerning social and exploration. And also to support other types of adventures. Like, it's okay to have an adventure RPG, but to also recognize that, like, like that there are rules for handling, social stuff. But and I go back and forth every now and again. Ultimately with something like D&D is there's not a whole lot of expressly focused on role-playing or exploration abilities. And the issue with the community is when you do have those abilities, they are often disregarded as, well, that's a terrible choice. Like, you shouldn't pick that for your character. It's a terrible choice. And it's like, well, no, because and I guess to use like gaming parlance or whatever, like you don't know what the meta of the game that I'm playing in is. Like what may be a suboptimal choice ends up being a very needed one. But anyway, this is getting off topic. So I want to pull it back a little bit. But But so yeah, so I said before, like there's not classes or whatever, but you pick when you make a character in Rod, Reel, and Fist. Um, basically, you pick it's not a class so much as an archetype, and some of the archetypes are very like Angler, which is you just get an extra die when you go fishing, or Brawler is you get an extra die if when you fight off animals. To more complicated ones. So like there's Mystic. So like you sometimes have visions or flashes of inspiration. So whenever you make camp, which is essentially when everybody decides like they're done for the day and you make camp, you can, convert any fish that you catch into like food or gear. You can ask essentially the game master, the swamp being, a single question relating to one in-game topic. They must then provide a genuinely helpful answer. And then whenever you break camp, you receive an extra die in the first round of the next fish or animal combat that you're in. There are two types in particular that I'm very pleased that are in this game that I love. So the first up is Tandem. This is essentially if you want to play a ranger, which is you get a pet, and the pet helps you do stuff. This is per scenario. I don't know what scenario is. You essentially get 3 different abilities you can use per scenario. And I don't know if scenario is like session, if it's per day, if it's per adventure. Oh, it's per adventure. So that is... that is less good, then. That's not great. Yeah, I would have said maybe like once per day or so, like, so first is like you pick a fish or animal that you're currently in combat with, you give it 2 stress. You immediately lose 2 stress or 2 exhaustion. Or if you are facing a common or uncommon fish, you catch it automatically. Yeah, I guess because they're super strong? But ultimately, being able to only use one of those abilities during the course of the adventure seems a bit limited. The other one is you just are a pet. You are a cute, plucky animal. However, so you receive +2 dice on all dice rolls. That's really powerful. However, you can't use equipment. With the exception of snacks. But yeah, and the only equipment that you can ever get are snacks. So I like that. It gives people the option of playing like some sort of the JRPG trope of sort of the cute, cuddly little animal creature that joins the party. So yeah. There's also Soul Searcher, which is for anyone that has played Harvest Moon, Story of Seasons, or Stardew Valley. Maybe your life's been too busy and too complicated for a while now. Maybe you've realized that you're not the person who you used to be, and you're not sure if you like the person you've become. Maybe there's problems at your heels, debts and entanglements you're trying to escape. Either way, your hope is that if you get lost enough in the old region, you'll find yourself instead. So it's essentially... you are tired of the hustle and bustle of modern life, and you want to get away to a much simpler time. Uh, it's when you select that, you choose to either get a penalty to fishing or to animal combat. You get an extra piece of gear, and it's the first time you catch a fish, the first time you defeat an animal in animal combat, the first time you lose a combat, and the first time the party enters combat against the fish of legend. You instantly learn a technique. So it's like also doing on a sort of questing adventure where that is like the most D&D thing. The most sort of traditional heroic fantasy type mechanic. And a lot of the techniques are very situational ones, which give you extra dice depending on certain things that happen. And they can apply to either fishing or to fighting off animals, or they can be sort of a variable one and apply to both and do different things based on the context. So let's see. We'll just find an example. Some of the equipment include like grappling hooks, nets, skipping stones, lemon. It's like if you use lemon on your snacks, it like gives you double the number of snacks. So yeah, so fishing techniques. So like mirrored surface gazing. So it's like essentially you can see through the glassy surface of the water. So essentially the GM must tell you exactly what fish you face when you catch a fish, including its name, any special abilities it has, any bonuses for catching it. There's something called Ratatosker's Reckless Abuse. Your enthusiasm takes no prisoners and leaves no one unscathed. So it's when you get excited and yell encouragement to people, you get a little too rowdy and too excited. So when you would use yell encouragement instead of helping, you can instead spend your use to just give both the fisher and the fish a point of stress. So yeah. I will admit I have not actually played this yet. I've only I've read through the PDF and then did another peruse through the print book. Now that I have a copy of it, so I don't know how it actually plays out in the course of normal play. I would be happy to report back on that when I've done that. My goal for any of my players that are listening is to try and incorporate this into our current D&D adventure and see how that goes. May not necessarily be a beach episode because they're kind of on the clock right now. Clock's ticking pretty quick. But to try and incorporate it into the adventure, just to kind of see like what we're dealing with this little RPG, and to see how it plays, because I'm really intrigued. I may have to end up running it myself instead of being able to play it, but that's how it goes. So, all right, I think I've talked about that for enough. I would highly encourage, if you are like me and you're really interested in fishing minigame systems, go check this out. It's on DriveThruRPG. Rod, Reel, and Fist by Richard Kelly. I think the PDF version is like $20, if that. So be sure to check that out. And with that, it's time for Quest Log. So quest log is where I talk about what sort of geeky goals I completed previous week, and what new geeky goals I'd like to set for myself this week. So last week was play Sunbreak and do credits page layout for my book. I did both. I got myself up to master rank 2, I believe. Got through basically a bunch of early game for Sunbreak. Really enjoying it. I kind of, it's one of the, it's a mixed bag with Monster Hunter on how, like, when you get to a new rank, you essentially start over from the beginning. Almost kind of like Warcraft and other MMOs, where like a new expansion comes out and suddenly like all your purples are now about as useful as like new green quality gear. But it's ultimately like getting back to a point of like seeing old gear become new again, in that like you're going back to fighting like, you know, early game monsters, and the gear that they provide now has like new skills attached to it, better slots for gems and stuff. And so having to like rework your build and adapt to it, and trying to figure out how best to sort of keep stuff on your build. You know, and it's wild in that like the stuff that I've seen on like the recommended build, I don't know if I agree with. And I don't know if it fits with my play style. So that's where it gets really interesting for me, is like, do I do what I typically do and sort of forego the meta in favor of something that I think works best for me? Which is something that happens a lot when I play games. You know, ultimately, well, and it's also like, it's still prioritizing skills that you want. It's just using gear that's not recommended in order to get them. So we'll see. I have to unlock a bunch of the other pieces of gear to do the full recommended set that a bunch of sites recommended. For bows specifically, because it's Monster Hunter and I'm going to use bows. So yeah. And then the credits page, turns out there's like recommended, like there's like templates for how to do a credits page. So I did that. Have to figure out just like fonts, like what fonts to pick and things like that. And whether to include artwork on it. But ultimately, like, the text is there. It's also weird, you know, for me to do a credits page, in that, I mean, I'm self-publishing, so like I don't have an editor. It's not a separate illustrator from the writer. You know, there's not a separate person doing the color or anything like that. So so it's basically just like a bunch of like copyright notices and things like that. So yeah. So that was last week. So I did manage to do both things. The goal for this week: play more Sunbreak. It's a little bit of a low-hanging fruit for a goal, but the idea is I would like to try to finish it this month before Xenoblade 3 comes out at the end of the month, because Xenoblade games are big. They take a lot of time. I haven't finished Triangle Strategy either, so I gotta get stuff done. And then do 3 pages of writer's notes. So the goal is, there's some space down at the bottom of each page in the book, underneath all of the comics. And I thought, well, so one of the things I'd like to do is to do sort of a bleed landscape, but maybe also include sort of what they have of like editor's notes or writer's notes for comics, to provide additional commentary. Especially now that it's been like a couple years since I've done the comics that are going in this book, to maybe provide a little bit more background or some more sort of explanation for things, to the readers, for a little bit of extra context. So yeah, so that's the goal. Do 3 pages of that. So that is going to wrap up our episode for this week. Thank you all for joining me, whether you are watching live or you are listening after the fact on your podcast app. Greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for your support. If you would like to check out the comics artwork, podcasts, and VODs and stuff, check out my website, 8-bitadventures.com. Over there you can find all that stuff. It's the main hub. It's the best place to find all that information and all that content. If you'd like to help support all of that content, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/8bitadventures. So the Patreon helps to offset the costs for website hosting, podcast hosting. So there are 3 podcasts that require hosting in addition to the website, as well as hosting for the website for Jamora, that I'm holding off until we do campaign 2 to kind of go in and sort of I'm gonna take the hammer to that website and redo everything. So expect that in the future. But yeah, it covered, and just supporting all the different endeavors that I provide content for. And ultimately, if we get enough people, that stuff becomes fully supported, and then there's extra money, is, the ability to hire or pay people, freelancers and pay commissions and stuff, to have nice things. So, that is the ultimate goal. But that said, every little bit counts. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month. Any amounts appreciated. And thank you to all of the current patrons for your support, and for your continued support. Finally, our opening theme for the past 269 episodes is One Up by Professor Shy Guy. You can find his work over at professorshyguy.bandcamp.com. He's a great chiptune artist, does a lot of original work as well as covers. So go check his work out. He's got a whole series of albums. And that is it. So, as always, folks, have fun, happy gaming, and enjoy your pie cake.